The months and even weeks leading up to college graduation are some of the most daunting yet exciting in a young person's life. Beyond campus life lies a whole new world that brings with it new challenges and life-changing experiences. For college graduates, the world truly is their oyster with limitless possibilities as their adult life truly begins. But for one young woman who had so much potential and was on track to dedicating herself to changing people's lives for the better, this dream would sadly never come true. The cap and gown she so eagerly waited to don on graduation day would remain unworn and her dreams unfulfilled. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 21 of the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimberlea, and I'm here with my co-host, my best friend, my fiance, soon-to-be dad and husband, Jonathan.
Hi. Darklivity. It's the dark downward slope into the degradation of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness brings to light.
Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on an episode, and thanks in advance for all of your patience. I'm almost ready to have a baby. And I also wanted to just give you a side note that we did get a lot of requests that you might want to send us or the baby something. So we are going to put our P.O. box down below in the description box, and don't feel obligated to send anything, but we're always grateful when you do. We want to start today's story by telling you about Haley Anderson. Haley Elizabeth Anderson was born on May 9th, 1995 to her parents Gordon and Karen, and she was born exactly on the date that she was due. A couple years later, Haley's younger sister Madeline arrived. They called her Maddie, and the girls grew up together in the neighborhood of Salisbury in Nassau County on Long Island in New York. Salisbury, as part of the bigger village of Westbury, really does have a tight-knit community feel, being not far from the similar family-centric areas on Long Island. It's the kind of picturesque place that gets 4 distinct seasons. Children can grow up enjoying all the best that the outdoors has to offer, while being just 30 miles away from the hustle and bustle of New York City, one of my favorite places to visit. Salisbury is also known for having highly rated public schools, low unemployment rates, and a cosmopolitan feel. Haley was known to her family as Hales, and in the words of her dad, Gordon, Haley, quote, tested the world, pushed buttons, but charted her own course, end quote. Thanks to her curiosity and on-the-go attitude from a very young age, she had a natural warmth about her that made people gravitate towards her and a very sweet, engaging personality. Her vivacious nature and loyal streak meant that she was never short of people who wanted to be around her. She just seemed to radiate love and positivity. And these were the qualities that one of her childhood friends, Sydney Matuzik, first noticed when she and Haley were in the same second grade class, along with Christina Tuttle, and soon the 3 friends were inseparable. It was in middle school that Haley began making short videos online, and we found a few of those that we're going to stitch together so that you can see how cute she was with her friends. They were just typical middle schoolers being silly together like many of us did when we were that age.
One of Haley's favorite things to do with her family was game night. She also liked spending time at the beach and skiing. As a teen, Haley attended W.T. Clark High School, and in her freshman year, she joined the hula hoop club.
I had never heard of a hula hoop club, but it sounds like fun.
No, but we had a surf class in our 0 period.
0 period. We didn't have that either, but y'all are here in California, so it kind of makes sense. Surfing sounds like fun.
Haley later went on to play in the school band. She also played lacrosse and field hockey, as well as running track. Haley was also intelligent, and she was busy fitting in her athletics around the time she dedicated to her school's various honor societies, as well as tutoring other students. More than anything, Haley was comfortable being herself. She was a quick learner, and she had a quirky sense of humor. She deeply cared for others, making her uniquely lovable, as did her obsession with the hit comedy show Friends.
I've never watched Friends. Don't come for me. I know people will be shocked, or maybe they won't even care, but I've just never really gotten into Friends. I think I was just busy when it was popular, but it never really piqued my interest. Did you watch Friends a lot?
I would put on Friends before I go to bed.
So that it would put you to sleep? Wow.
I don't think they make sitcoms with live audiences anymore, though.
Oh, it was a live audience. That's kind of cool.
If they do, let us know in the comments. I'd like to watch that. But let's get back to Haley. As she got older, Haley's friends and family could see her free spirit manifest into a modern hippie approach to life. Very little phased Haley, and she was fiercely independent.
Every Friday night, she and her friends Sydney and Christina would go and get pizza and hang out. And the girls also loved making really funny YouTube videos together where they were just laughing and goofing around and making each other laugh with all kinds of skits. They did this one where they were pretending to do a driving test, and then they put a whole bunch of stuffed animals in the back seat. Just typical teenage antics. And even though Haley was a happy and cheerful girl, in 2009, when she was only 14 years old, she experienced family upheaval when her parents decided to get divorced, and her dad, Gordon, moved to Savannah, Georgia. Karen was now raising Haley and Maddie pretty much on her own, but it was Karen's perseverance and her strength that helped everyone get through it. Karen was a really great mother, and she instilled values in her children, and even though it was a tough time for them all as they adjusted to this huge change, this didn't affect the relationship that Haley had with either of her parents, who, along with her sister, she loved more than anything in the world. And they loved her. Among some of her closest friends at the time were her neighbors, Melanie and Joni Heaney, whose mom, Patty, was also very close with Haley's mom, Karen. And the Andersons were grateful to have such a great support system and neighbors that they could lean on during this incredibly tough time. For the next couple years, Haley just tried to make it through high school surrounded by her family and good friends. It looks like from what I saw on her Facebook page that she even went on a trip to Italy with a group of her girlfriends, and it looked like they had a lot of fun together. And then there was prom, and it appears she went with her best guy friend, Joe Hoffman. She posted a picture of them joking around that she didn't know how to put on his corsage. Is it a corsage?
It's a boutonniere.
Boutonniere, exactly. And here we're going to show you a picture if you are watching. And then, of course, there was graduation as well as senior pictures that year. And Haley was really coming to her own. And she reminds me of a mixture between Taylor Swift and Jessica Simpson. She's really pretty. And she was just overall the girl next door type of look. In the summer of 2012, Haley began looking at different colleges. She knew that she wanted to become a nurse, so she was visiting different schools with the nursing programs, and between settling on a nursing school to apply to and graduating high school, Haley began dating a guy named Rafael Reyes, who was the same age as she was at the time. Haley was excited about pursuing her nursing degree, and after visiting Binghamton University, she fell in love with it. The large campus and how beautiful it was during the summer, even though it was very cold during the winter. She knew it was where she wanted to be. She was accepted into their 5-year program in the Decker School of Nursing, located in the city of Binghamton in Broome County in the southern tier of upstate New York. It's home to about 200,000 people. The university itself is affectionately known as Bing U, and it has recently been voted among the top 10 best college campuses on the East Coast and has 13,000 students from over 100 countries. It's considered a public Ivy school. This is a term that applies to public universities that are said to offer the experience and academic rigor and graduate job opportunities of Ivy League colleges. So, of course, Karen was very proud of her daughter.
Haley had always been close with her sister Maddie, but in the lead up to Haley moving to Binghamton, Maddie realized that aside from breaks during the academic year, Haley's absence during most of the year was going to be very hard. Maddie could trust her big sister with anything and had always been there for her when she needed her.
I did see a post on Maddie's Facebook from August 23rd of 2012 that read, quote, "Honestly, I don't know what I would do without you. You're the best person in the world. I can trust you with anything, and I know you're always there for me when I need you. It's going to be so hard when you leave. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself at 3 a.m. or ever. Let's make our last year together count. I love you," end quote. And then she tagged Haley. That's the love of a sister right there. Haley was also super close with her BFF since pre-K, Stephanie Kaufman, and as a matter of fact, that summer the besties got matching tattoos on their backs that read, "You see all of my light and you love my dark." And I looked this up. It's actually from Alanis Morissette's song called Everything. I mean, it just could be like a random quote that she used in a song, but the song is about someone who sees all sides of you, but stays around, and there's nothing that they can't relate to. So it is a great tribute two best friends. They shared pictures of their matching tattoos on Facebook and Instagram, standing beside one another, showing off their upper backs with their matching quote. And Haley posted, quote, "Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do without her next year. Since pre-K, she's stood by my side through everything. I love you so much forever and always, through light and dark." And then she tagged Stephanie. It wasn't the last time she'd get tattooed either. She got a couple other ones while she was in college.
That year went by fast, and everyone was sad to see Haley move away. But everyone in her life was thrilled that she was headed to a school with such a great reputation and a nursing program.
Especially since the college was a SUNY school, which basically stands for State University of New York. And these state schools are known for students who end up getting great jobs after graduation. It's also the type of campus where there's a lot of social activities, parties, bars, pretty much a typical college life.
Haley immediately threw herself into her studies and campus life. Her positive, upbeat energy, contagious laugh, and zest for life drew people to her. And she soon developed close and meaningful new friendships. Among her college social circle were economics major Josephine Artin, known as Josie, political science student Michelle Tapali, Daniel Greenberg, and later accounting student Brittany Piquette. Brittany admired how Haley could enter a room full of strangers at a party and be everyone's new best friend by the end of the night. Part of what made her so endearing and lovable was her ability to laugh at herself, goof off, and be silly. I'm much like that.
And her friends also said she had a distinctive laugh that would stand out. I have a distinctive voice, but not maybe a distinctive laugh. But I have known friends like that who I can know they're in the room because I hear them laughing.
Totally.
The friends also enjoyed playing video games together on Brittany's old PlayStation 2. That's a throwback. And as a music lover, one of Haley's favorite things to do was hang out in the dorms with one of her other friends and nursing classmates, Jesse Boa, who was a talented guitarist. And Haley loved listening to Jesse strum away and was always asking him to play songs for her. I think at this point, Haley might have still been dating Raphael, since I did see him in many of her pictures going to different parties and festivals and even in her dorm room on campus. You could tell she was definitely living it up her freshman year of college. They were actually still dating in 2015, but it seems like that was the last year they dated, as Haley was spreading her wings at this point, meeting new people and getting to know herself as an adult. One of Haley's friends from school that we already mentioned, Daniel Greenberg, was also enrolled in the 5-year degree, hoping to become a physician. When they began hanging out, it was Haley's mission to convert Daniel into being a lover of pistachio ice cream. The first time he tried it, Haley didn't even give him an option. She just insisted in a cute way that this was the ice cream he was going to be having. And much to Daniel's surprise, Haley was right. He didn't have a choice. And I've never really liked pistachio or even ice cream. I'd rather have like a chocolate chip cookie.
I like pistachio ice cream.
I like a pistachio latte.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty good. Daniel was also one of the few people outside of her nursing class that she could freely go into detail with when it came to all things anatomy and physiology. I mean, he was studying to become a doctor after all. While it may have been too much for some of Haley's other friends to stomach, Daniel was inspired by Haley's passion for learning about the human body.
But college wasn't all about parties and being social. When it came to Haley's studies, her strong work ethic and self-discipline were the envy of other students, and her efforts were rewarded. She was consistently doing well on her tests. She studied hours, getting straight A's. Haley's friends, her classmates, and faculty staff knew she'd excel in her career. She had a deep drive to help people and would make an outstanding nurse. Actually, during her first summer, she applied for an externship with Northwell Health back in Long Island, and she got it. So that whole summer, while back home and close to her family, she spent a lot of that time working hard to gain experience in the medical field.
Everyone could tell that Haley had found her calling. She even thought about possibly becoming a traveling nurse after she graduated so that she could see different parts of the United States and maybe beyond. She had a lot of big dreams and they were all coming together. But she was still testing the waters with a lot of new things as well. Things that she was getting a chance to experience, which were really wise during college. It's a time when many people truly find themselves. And I know that I switched my major a couple times before I settled on psychology and sociology. And for Haley, there were many things that she was experiencing, not just academically, but socially, as well as about herself.
Around 2014, Haley did what many college students do. She got a job to earn herself some much needed extra cash. Haley worked on campus as a barista at Being Used Jazzman's Brew and Bakery, which is located inside the library at the school. There, she struck up a friendship with her boss, Kylie O'Neill, and her coworker, Athena. Soon, Haley and Kaya were more than supervisor and employee. They were close friends, and Kylie became someone Haley regularly turned to for advice and also a shoulder to lean on. Kaya felt they were more like sisters than friends, later describing her friend as a beacon of joy.
When Haley's dad, Gordon, came to visit from Georgia, Haley proudly showed him around the campus, but most of their time was spent in the library, which made sense because that is where Haley worked as a barista, and they loved to spend time there together. Haley even showed her dad her favorite study spots, which prompted him to joke around and call her a nerd. But Haley took it as a compliment and just smiled and laughed. She was happy to share her college experience with her father, who was thrilled that his daughter was having such a blast and loving life. And when she came home from college on breaks, she didn't rest. Instead, she worked at another job, an ice cream shop with her sister Maddie. And I know we mentioned Raphael. Of course, dating was also a huge part of the whole college experience. And by May of 2016, Haley had met a new man, a fellow student named Kevin Ocampo. He was also from Long Island, and they got along really well. They had a lot in common, and Haley's friends thought of Kevin as cute, funny, and sweet.
Kevin also let Haley have the freedom to be herself. She was quite the free spirit at this point, and he could see how passionate Haley was about nursing as well as being true to her hippie spirit. Haley told Kevin that her dream was to one day move to California and travel around in a van while still working as a nurse. Kevin and Haley really enjoyed each other's company, and they had a lot of fun together. It wasn't long before Haley and Kevin made it official. On May 23, 2016, they posted their new relationship status on Facebook. But it was old news to all their friends. They saw the couple's chemistry long before they had even had the label. Haley introduced Kevin to her mom, and she could tell how much fun they had together and how well they got along. But they knew that college was the time to spread your wings socially and to get to know a lot of different people. But with the pressures of study, part-time jobs, and a rich social life, they knew that getting tied down in a serious relationship wasn't necessarily the best idea. The closer and closer it got to graduation, Haley began to realize she needed to focus on school. She still had strong feelings for Kevin, but instead of being as serious, they mutually decided to break up, but still talk and see one another when they could.
Right. They went from being super serious to being more of friends with benefits, so to speak. So even when Haley and Kevin weren't hooking up and hanging out with each other as boyfriend and girlfriend, they were still friendly and they had a tremendous amount of respect for one another. Haley just knew in her heart that it was way too early for her to settle down with just one guy. She had the rest of her life to do that, and she was still figuring things out in her own life, like so many of us are when we're young. It was clear that she also wanted to casually date and see who else was out there, which was actually really normal, and you should be doing at that age. She figured if it was meant to be with Kevin, then they would somehow make their way back together. I actually think that is the best time to get to know what you like, experience different people, personalities, and relationships. She was going out, she was meeting new people, and having those casual hookups. And one of the guys who had kind of been hoping that Haley would become single was one of her classmates in her nursing program, Orlando Tercero. And we talked about this in another video, but I mentioned how a lot of times, not all the time, but guys will sort of hang around, be your friend, because they're hoping to get a chance to date you. It doesn't always happen. But Haley and Orlando actually met in Haley's sophomore year. He was a fellow nursing student originally from Miami, Florida, but grew up in Nicaragua with his family. But he was living back in Miami when he got accepted to Bing U. Orlando had dual citizenship, and he would go back to visit his mother in Nicaragua since sadly his father was a doctor but had passed away not too long before this, and Orlando had wanted to make him proud by going into the medical field.
Orlando was also part of the same fraternity that Haley's ex Kevin was part of. They knew one another and they were pretty good friends. They connected because they were both from Hispanic backgrounds. Like Haley, Orlando was outgoing, fun, and loved having a good time and loved partying. When Haley became single after she and Kevin broke it off, Orlando kind of moved in and took a shot at being more than friends with her. They actually reconnected at a frat party at Kevin's place and had a lot of fun together. They were both kind of the life of the party and had been keeping in touch after that night.
But we know, and so did all of Haley's friends, that she wasn't looking for another serious relationship. However, she and Orlando had gotten close and they connected on things related to their nursing studies. So they'd hang out a lot. And eventually they did end up hooking up. You're combining partying and alcohol and a good time and connection. But she made it clear that it was just for fun and she wanted to keep her options open since graduation was so close and they'd be so busy with the end of the year activities, tests, everything like that.
But that didn't stop Orlando from trying to become more than just a hookup. He saw Haley as a catch and definitely tried to convince her that they have something great together. Still, Haley decided it was best they preserve their friendship and not move it to the next level.
It's a very common situation that I'm sure most, if not all of us, have been through at some point. You have a connection with someone, you laugh together, you hang out, you have fun, but there just isn't the romantic feelings there. But like I said, alcohol, having a good time, you hook up, that's great. But if not, that's okay too. And I want to point out that it's all right to decide who gets to have more of our time, our presence, and especially our bodies. And you can't make someone love you or be with you, and you wouldn't want to because, that's not genuine. Plus, in Haley's case, she still had feelings for Kevin. They were just putting things on pause to focus on their careers. And by the late summer of 2017, she and Kevin reconnected and they were back together as a couple. But it also wasn't a secret that she had been with Orlando as more than just friends. And although I'm sure Kevin wasn't exactly thrilled, he understood their agreement at the time and let Haley have the freedom that she wanted and craved.
6 months later, in March of 2018, 22-year-old Haley was in her 5th and final year of college. Graduation was only 2 months away, and Haley couldn't wait to get out there into the workforce full-time. She already had a job lined up with Northwell Health. Haley would be diving straight into the fast-paced nursing role because her position was based in an emergency room at the hospital run by Northwell on Long Island. That was close to her home. The final step would be passing her state nursing board exams in June.
And no one was worried about Haley not passing. She'd always done so well academically. She had already completed a summer externship, as we mentioned, and she also did another one at North Shore University, where the staff thoroughly enjoyed working with her and saw her as vibrant and an engaging young woman.
Of course, Haley's family was so proud of her, and they knew how passionate she was about nursing and also being able to help people significantly. This career path would open up so many opportunities for Haley, including traveling, which she expressed her desire to do right away. Her skills would also be in demand wherever she wanted to go, and the professional freedom this offered was exciting.
It totally makes sense why Haley would want the freedom of not being tied to one person or place when she had so many things on the horizon. But it was also great, like you said, to be closer to home, which her mom, Karen, was looking forward to, and I'm sure her sister as well. Haley had worked so hard, and Karen was planning on throwing her a big graduation party, and Haley made this long list of everyone she wanted to invite.
By now, Haley was living off campus with her friends Josie and Michelle in a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home at 4 Florence Avenue, about a mile from the university. On her bedroom wall, she had 2 posters from her favorite TV show, Friends. Whenever reruns were on, Haley would be watching, quoting the actors verbatim before their lines were even spoke.
Did you have a show that you used to watch like that? Because I religiously watched My So-Called Life, and I knew every line. Every line. Jordan Catalano, if you know, you know. Leave it in the comments. What was your favorite show growing up?
One of my favorite shows I used to watch religiously was Ren and Stimpy. On Monday, March 5th, Haley got together with many of her friends and they all dressed up in green for the Belmar Parade Day mile race. It's a St. Patrick's Day event, a 1-mile walk or run down Main Street in Binghamton that's held immediately before the famous St. Patrick's Day Parade.
But you don't have to be a part of the race to be a part of the fun. And by the looks of the photos of Haley and her friends, it appeared to me that they were most likely spectators that day, but she did say that she got to see all of her favorite people in one day. I saw this post on her Instagram, and I'm just going to let you guys know that that would be Haley's very last Instagram post.
Wednesday nights were game nights at Haley and her roommate's place, and it was a ritual between them. A tradition that Haley had continued even though she was busy because she had such happy memories of game nights with her own family back in Salisbury. She and her friends played games like Pictionary, Taboo, and Haley's favorite, Quiplash, where players had to think on their feet to come up with the most witty or clever answers to prompts. I love playing board games with you.
Aw, thanks. I do too. We play a lot of board games.
Mm-hmm.
On the evening of Wednesday, March 7th, Haley hung out with Josie and Michelle at home, just chilling, drinking some wine, playing those board games. And it was one of those nights where the hours just went by so fast, and the girls were still up into the early morning hours. But later that morning, now we're on Thursday, March 8th, Haley's roommates didn't see her up and around the house. But that wasn't that unusual since they all knew that Haley loved to sleep and everyone had been up so late. So Josie did send Haley a quick text, but she never heard back. But like I said, she just figured she was asleep and would connect with her later that day. And even as the day wore on, Josie and Michelle weren't concerned despite not hearing from Haley. It wasn't until later that night that her roommates were really unsettled. Haley had promised to attend a poetry reading that Josie was giving at a local bar, and she never showed up. And that wasn't like her. But Haley was a big girl, and her friends knew how independent she was. Maybe something important came up and she couldn't make it. They were sure she would just let them know what happened to her later.
But Josie was distraught by the next day, Friday, March 9th. It didn't make sense that Haley hadn't come home yet. They checked with her other friends, and none of them received any responses to their messages, voicemails, or missed calls. Haley was always on her phone, so the lack of response to calls and texts was highly unusual. Plus, there were no new posts on her social media accounts either.
And nowadays, that's actually a huge sign that something's wrong. For example, it is very rare that I don't post an Instagram story the entire day. I mean, it has definitely happened, but it's rare that I go a whole 24 hours without sharing a meme or any activity. So Haley's roommates were starting to get worried and scared. Josie decided to call Orlando's close friend and roommate Jesse Boa, since Haley sometimes hung out over there and even slept over at Orlando's place. But Jesse hadn't seen Haley either, and he hadn't even seen Orlando. And he actually joked with Josie that maybe Orlando and Haley went and got eloped. I know that sounds weird, but he would often hear Orlando and Haley just laughing all night long, and not everyone was aware of their entire backstory. But no, he had not seen Haley, so Josie moved on to calling other friends. Finally, at a loss for what to do next, Michelle quickly jumped on the Find My Friends app on her iPhone. Haley and her friends all had this set up to help locate one another in case of emergencies, and they felt like this was one of those times.
What was odd was that when Michelle located Haley's cell via the app, she could see that it was at Orlando's house. It's an off-campus 3-bedroom, 1-bath residence at 23 Oak Street where he lived with some other roommates, including Jesse, whom Kimber just mentioned Josie speaking with.
That's why she thought it was odd, because she just checked over there and now she's seeing that the phone is pinging at his home. And this app is showing her phone is there, but it doesn't mean the person is with their phone. So they still didn't know if they would find Haley there, especially since Jesse had just said he hadn't seen her. But it was their first clue as to where Haley may have gone after the board games that night. I was kind of thinking, wow, I'm kind of surprised that her phone was still charged. Mm-hmm. And then I was thinking maybe it was showing the last known location of Haley's phone. Because remember, it's now Friday and we're talking an iPhone from 2018. Maybe earlier, but they figured since that's all the information they had, they'd go over there and see if there was any signs of Haley.
When Josie and Michelle drove to Orlando's house, they didn't see his car in the driveway and they started to get a bad feeling. Haley wouldn't be at Orlando's by herself, but they were still hoping that maybe she'd stop by there to pick up her phone that she left behind. But when they knocked, no one answered the door. And at this point, the roommates were deeply concerned for Haley's welfare.
I think we all need friends like Josie and Michelle if we don't already have them.
Yeah. They decided to walk around the house looking into the windows so they could see if Haley or anyone else was inside. But they didn't see anyone. And that's when they decided to go to the side window to see if they could get in somehow.
That way they could see if just Haley's phone had been left behind, or if it was even still there, or if Haley was inside.
After managing to open up the window, Josie boosted Michelle up first, and she went ahead of Josie, and then helped pull her inside. Everything was silent in the house. It didn't appear that anyone was home, but the girls were on a mission, so they began looking inside every room. When they got to Orlando's bedroom, Michelle was ahead of Josie and got inside first, and that's when she saw Haley asleep on Orlando's bed.
She was laying on her back, almost sitting upright with her arms at her sides, and she had a blanket pulled halfway up her body. The position didn't look natural, like it wouldn't be the way that someone would fall asleep. And as Michelle got closer, she called out to Haley and tried to wake her up, but she wasn't moving or responding. She also looked oddly pale, and that's when it hit Michelle that Haley could be dead. And she screamed out to Josie to call 911. Josie gets into the bedroom and she sees Haley, and she wasn't sure if she was dead, but she noticed how pale she was. And I've never really seen that. I mean, I guess in movies and maybe corpses when we see them in like autopsies, but I can just imagine like they don't have, life in them. So in a panic around 12:45, the girls frantically dialed 911. The operator asked if Haley was breathing, but it was clear from the way they found her and the way that her skin looked that she was no longer alive. Josie knew her friend was gone, but it was just so shocking and confusing because what happened?
Soon, officers from the Bingham PD's Detective Division and Crime Scene Unit, including Investigator Carl Peters, Sergeant Matthew Zandy, Lieutenant Corey Miner, and Officer Jessica Griffin, were on the scene. And right away, it was a bit of a confusing scene. It wasn't just confined to Orlando's bedroom, but we'll get to everything that the officer saw later. Lieutenant Miner was leading the search, and he noticed there were two areas of interest. One was, of course, Orlando's bedroom, but the other was the entryway from the dining room to the kitchen.
First, there was a bloodstained blanket that was lying on the floor in between the threshold underneath the archway from the dining room going into the kitchen, as well as a chair that was kind of off to the side right when you're making your way through. If you look up at the top of the door frame, there was a very odd makeshift noose or strangulation device. We're going to get into that in just a moment and go into more detail about this. But there was also some drops of blood on the kitchen tile.
But when they looked at Haley's body, it didn't appear she suffered any injuries that would have resulted in bleeding. But there was what looked like a bloody shoe next to the bed Haley was lying in. So as far as police were concerned, at this early stage, this was considered a suspicious death until they could confirm otherwise. For the next 2 hours, detectives went door to door asking neighbors if they'd seen anything or heard anything suspicious in the past few days. Although medical personnel and technicians from the medical examiner's office were on the scene to transport Haley's body, the investigators were not permitted to search the home. They needed to wait on the warrant. As of now, this was merely a death investigation. But as death investigators preliminarily examined Haley, they noticed what appeared to be bruises around her neck and some broken blood vessels on her face. These are usually telltale signs of asphyxiation. There was also severe bruising on her arms and a handprint on one of them.
Once the search warrant was granted, investigators noticed other things about the house as they processed the scene. There was a pharmacy receipt for the purchase of 2 over-the-counter sleep aids. It was melatonin and I think like Z-Quil or NyQuil. There was also a low bookshelf in the dining room, which held a stereo and speakers, and it had kind of been pulled from the wall and it was at an odd angle. But let's go back to what was hanging from that door frame leading into the kitchen. As John and I said, it was like a makeshift noose fashioned out of 4 eye hooks. I've seen these and I used to have these before, but we're going to get to why I think this is weird, but they're screwed into the beam above the door frame. And there's a goldish yellow tie, like a necktie, that had been threaded through these hooks, and it was fashioned into a knot, like it had been kind of put around someone's neck or meant to be put around someone's neck. And the blood that was found on the floor was close by, and the chair was close to this door frame. So if you're putting it all together, it looked like someone had hoisted themselves up, slipped this tie around their neck, and tried to take their own life. Nearby, there were more of those hooks and a hammer, and on the kitchen counter was medical gauze, the type you would use to bandage a wound. There was also bloody gauze and paper towels found in the kitchen trash. So had Haley done this to herself? Or was it someone else? That's what they were trying to figure out at this point. That's why it was a suspicious death. Well, they were about to get a big clue as to what transpired in that home. When scouring through the bedroom, investigators found a note. Now, much of it was not legible, and it was mostly written in Spanish, but part of the note read, "Lament mucho esto," which is translated as, "I'm really sorry about this." Then the note went on to say, "I'm sorry, this is stupid, I'm sorry. Mommy taught me life is a momentary thing. Nothing is ours. Mommy, I'm sorry. I don't have any words. I never felt I could be capable of doing this. And the note ended with Papi te veo pronto, which is like saying that he will see his father soon. And we know that his father had been deceased for the past 5 years. So it read both as a confession and as a goodbye, written by someone that was planning on leaving this world. It appeared as though the most obvious answer to who set this all up, the noose, and possibly hurt Haley, was Orlando. But where was he? And was that his blood on the floor? Obviously, if he left, he wasn't dead. So it would be considered a failed attempt at self-harm, if that. And I'm not here to scrutinize methods, and this is what I was going to say about those hooks. I'm not here to scrutinize this, but we are here to analyze cases and get the audience opinion. And to me, this looked like a shoddy way to set up this type of device. I'm not an expert, but those little hooks, they don't hold much weight at all. Anyone would be able to tell that they wouldn't be sufficient, not to mention the tie.
The tie works.
It can work in certain situations, but the way that this is set up,
Yeah, this doesn't
look right, because we also have a low ceiling, the small hooks, the slippery necktie. It just seems staged to me. However, it seems like the person who set this up did injure themselves because we've got blood. But I also kind of wondered why they would put a blanket right underneath. Kind of weird. It's almost like they wanted to make sure something caught their fall. And I'm telling you right now, it gets even more interesting. After an officer, Christy Sager, arrived at the scene, she realized this was actually the second call that law enforcement got to this address, 23 Oak Street, on the same day. So that's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's definitely weird. Well, earlier in that morning, Officer Sager went out there to conduct a welfare check after Sonia, Orlando's sister, made a call to Binghamton Police asking them to see if he was okay, because she received a worrying text from him. Binghamton Police told Binghamton Police Department about the welfare check, but when law enforcement went to Orlando's for the first time, no one had opened the door in response to their knocking. So the officers left.
What was the text?
Orlando texted his sister, quote, "I'm a disgrace to the family. I did something bad," end quote.
Well, that's very telling, but it's also pretty cryptic. And meanwhile, law enforcement had to break the devastating news of what happened to Haley's family. The same afternoon that her body was found back in Salisbury, 2 police officers made their way out to Karen's mom's house. Karen wasn't home when they arrived, but soon after she pulled in and noticed this black car sitting outside near her house with 2 men inside that were wearing suits, and that stood out to her. She walked into her home and looked out the window at the car, and it did scare her a bit. She didn't know why they were out there, but she went about her normal day just feeding the dog. Then the men proceeded to get out of their car, walk up her driveway, and knock on her door. They introduced themselves and asked if they could come inside to speak with her. At that point, she wanted them to just tell her why they were there, but before they would, they said they needed to actually come inside and sit down with her before they broke the news. They sat at Karen's dining room table, and as soon as they started speaking, it was all a blur. Karen just recalls hearing her daughter's name, followed by suspicious death and the address of 23 Oak Street. One thing was certain by the end of that conversation. She realized that Haley was no longer alive. Karen initially couldn't comprehend what she was being told. She had just spoken to her daughter 3 days before when Haley called her to let her know that she was getting $400 back on her tax refund, and she was really excited. But as the news sunk in, Karen just felt numb. She was in shock that her generous, kind-hearted, compassionate daughter was gone. The officers wouldn't even leave until Karen had a friend come over and be with her. So she called her neighbor Patty, who was Haley's friend Joni and Melanie's mom. And when Karen called Patty, she was in a haze, but she told her that Haley was dead. And Joni was home at the time, and she heard her mother scream. So she ran into the room and asked what was going on. And all Patty could do was scream, "Haley's dead." And at that point, Joni fell to her knees. And as the news traveled and her other friends were getting word of what happened, they were not taking it well. Melanie screamed so loud that her roommates actually had to pick her up and carry her to her bedroom to calm her down. Sydney was in the middle of getting ready to go on a double date with Christina and her boyfriend when another friend texted them with the news. And they were stunned and in shock because they said that you never think this is going to happen to your best friend. It was unreal. But what's interesting is that the first person that popped into their head was Orlando. And no one had even told them anything about where Haley was found or what happened. They just had this very bad feeling because of the past, which we're going to get to. And back at Karen's, the officers had asked her if she knew anything about Orlando. And Karen let them know that she had met him over Super Bowl weekend back on February 3rd and 4th, about a month earlier, when she came to campus to visit Haley. But she didn't know much about him other than the two had met during Haley's second year of nursing school. And then he had a sister, Sonia, that lived out in Queens. His mother lived back in Nicaragua, and his father had passed away several years ago. However, Karen said she did know that Haley and Orlando had gotten close over the past year or so. But Haley had expressed concerns in regard to Orlando's seemingly possessive behavior. And there will be more of this. But let's come back to that and focus our attention on the autopsy report.
The autopsy was conducted the very next day on March 10th by pathologist Dr. James Tazarian at Lourdes Hospital in Binghamton. Haley had sustained bruises to her neck, and there were finger marks on both sides. She also had petechial hemorrhaging on her face and abrasions on the inside of her lower lip. The cause of death was compression of the neck caused by manual strangulation, with Haley's necklace that she was wearing at the time acting as a ligature. The manner of death was ruled a homicide.
After the report was released to the investigators, Detective Captain John Ryan released a statement announcing that while there were no suspects in custody, there was no danger to the public. He went on to explain that this circumstance was not a random act involving a stranger. And when they say this, I'm always like, oh, it must have been someone close to her, somebody that she knew. They hadn't publicly identified Orlando at this stage as their main suspect, but he was their main suspect. And there were many reasons for that. The university also provided a statement expressing condolences to Haley's friends and her family. They also were providing services for anyone that needed any kind of counseling. It was terrifying. The house where Haley was found was in a residential area that was primarily rented by university students. Fear was spreading throughout the entire campus, and so were the assumptions and the gossip.
Even though the murder had been committed off campus, Binghamton investigators were assisted by the New York State University Police, the Port Authority Police Department of New York, and the Nassau County Police Department. As news of Haley's murder spread rapidly across both campus and amongst her friends back in Salisbury, profound shock and distress were felt by all, especially students and staff of the nursing faculty. Here was someone on the cusp of a key milestone in her life. Michelle couldn't understand why anyone would want to hurt her friend, someone who just wanted to help people, and she didn't have a bad bone in her body. Haley's childhood friends Sydney and Christina were in disbelief that the bubbly, big-hearted girl that they used to share pizza and make silly videos with was no longer in their lives. Senior nursing classes scheduled for March 12th were canceled. The BingU president released a statement in the wake of Haley's murder, writing, "We have lost a beloved and vital member of Binghamton University family. Haley was just months away from graduation with a bright future ahead of her, and it's difficult to comprehend that she will no longer be with us." Mario Ortiz, the dean of university's Decker School of Nursing, also issued a statement about her murder, saying that Haley was a wonderful and caring part of the Decker family.
And it's shocking. You don't expect a young person to die, much less from being murdered. And I recall back when I was in college, 2 friends of mine died in a car accident on their way home from a country music concert. And the next day on campus, there was this eerie silence. I will never forget. In my first class of the day, I could just hear people whispering, and I knew that something wasn't right. And soon we all found out about the news, and it just rocked my campus. And that wasn't even a murder. That was a tragic accident. So I can just imagine something like this going on and people being scared and they don't know what's happening. They don't know if someone else is going to be targeted and they're just confused. And of course, Haley's parents and sister were the ones whose worlds were the most profoundly shattered as they got this news and they tried to understand it. Her dad, Gordon, traveled to the university to undertake the painful task of cleaning out Haley's bedroom. Over her window, Gordon found a purple wooden sign with the word love written on it. It just said so much about what drove Haley in life and how she approached all of her relationships and interactions with everyone she encountered. Gordon saved that sign, as well as Haley's university ID card, and her dream catcher. All the things that represented the different facets of her life and personality that her family could remember her by. And that's got to be really tough for a parent to have to do. But going back to this investigation, who was this guy, Orlando? What was he all about, and where was he now? Well, investigators began looking further into any records they may have had in relation to their prime suspect. And they were also receiving phone calls from Haley's friends. They wanted to tell investigators what they knew about the guy who was renting the house where Haley's body had been found. Orlando Enrique Tesoro Moreno was born on November 2nd, 1995 in Miami, Florida. He grew up with his two older sisters in a well-off family and was close to his father, Ronald, who was also a doctor. In 2005, the family moved back to Nicaragua to live in the city of Chinandega. And Orlando would travel back to the U.S. all the time because it appears that he was having treatment for an undisclosed medical condition, which may have been respiratory related. Eventually, Orlando's two sisters studied to become doctors, and both of them moved back to the U.S., with Sonia settling in New York.
Orlando attended school at Colegio Hogar Balo VI back in Nicaragua. After graduating in 2013, he too returned to the U.S. the following year after winning a scholarship to Bing U to study nursing. Orlando's mom, Martha, stayed behind Nicaragua following the death of her husband, Ronald, that same year. Not long after being in the nursing program, Orlando met Haley, and the pair became friends. After seeing each other casually for a while, though we know Haley decided she just wanted to keep things platonic, part of the reason was that Orlando seemed to get upset about things often, and the never-ending drama wasn't worth it for Haley. Orlando also made Haley feel guilty after he was kicked out of the fraternity, apparently because they'd been intimate.
Remember, this was Kevin's frat at first, and it was actually Kevin who met Orlando through Haley at a party, and then the two of them connected because they were both Hispanic and spoke Spanish. So Kevin invited Orlando to be a part of the fraternity to begin with. But when the Brotherhood got word that Orlando had made a move on Kevin's girl and ended up hooking up with her when they were on one of their off moments, the fraternity looked down on this because they considered Haley Kevin's girlfriend, regardless if they were on or off. And Orlando's behavior was against fraternity rules. So Orlando was so hurt by being kicked out that he even threatened self-harm. Let's jump to 6 months before Haley's murder on the night of September 15th, 2017. Haley attended a party at Orlando's house. Haley and Kevin were dating exclusively again at this point, and Orlando was not happy about it. He actually confronted Haley, getting in her face and yelling at her. But when he realized that people had seen him act this way, he instantly changed. And he let Haley know that he felt embarrassed and he was apologetic. Orlando then changed his behavior and began pouring shots for everyone, all of Haley's friends, as a way of smoothing things over. By the end of the night, Orlando was very intoxicated. He drank way too much and was throwing up. And like a good friend, Haley actually helped put Orlando to bed and then left and went home. But Orlando continued to text her even after she left with Kevin, who was spending the night at her house. It sounds like quite a love triangle. If I were Kevin, I think I'd be pretty upset. But I know that everyone has their own boundaries and their own limits.
Around 3 p.m. the following afternoon, September 16th, Kevin was leaving Haley's place after sleeping over when he noticed the tires on her 2001 Mercury Sable had been slashed.
Okay, that's actually next level right there, like slashing someone's tires.
Yeah. When Haley went outside to look at the damage, she posted on Snapchat about what happened, and her caption read, "Welcome to my life."
We actually have that video, so we're going to play it for you now.
Who the slashed every single one of my tires last night?
So there you go. Haley posted that asking who the F slashed all 4 of her tires the night before. And we know who was yelling at her the night before at that party. So of course, Orlando was the very first person that Haley thought could have done this. So she texted him, confronting him. And it makes sense, right? He was the one that was mad. She left with Kevin. Kevin was with her.
And he was intoxicated.
Exactly, and that adds to all this. But to be fair, Haley did make it clear to him that she wasn't interested in more. But on the other hand, Orlando could have felt used by her.
Maybe it is his choice to keep hooking up with her.
That's true, even though she had told him she doesn't want anything more. But I want to make that very clear because of what's to come. On one hand, I can see how frustrating it would be for someone like Orlando. It's happened to all of us, I'm sure, where we like someone more than they like us. And maybe you're willing to get close to them, even if all they're offering is crumbs. And then we're made to feel like someone else gets the cake and gets to eat it too, which would be Kevin. But that's a choice. However, rejection does hurt, and Orlando didn't hide how he felt about Haley choosing to be back with Kevin after saying she didn't want more right now. But the truth is, sometimes you just don't want more with a certain person. And I want to kind of normalize that. Like, it's okay to tell someone you don't want to be with them, but you've got to be honest as well, not just say, I don't want a girlfriend right now, but then you get a girlfriend. It's really, no, I don't want you.
Right. I'd say the hardest part is taking your own medicine too. If you say to someone, I don't want you anymore, then you yourself should not want them either.
That's true. And Haley would still get close with Orlando, even when she was on her off times from Kevin. But slashing someone's tires is a lot. It's kind of over the top if it was Orlando. He could talk to her. He could write her a letter. He could send a heartfelt text, just expressing his feelings. All that is acceptable, but it's extreme to go and harm somebody's personal property.
Right. Effective communication and respecting each other's boundaries is essential in any relationship. When Orlando messaged Haley back, he said it wasn't him and that the same thing happened to his rear tires. They had been slashed. He also sent her screenshots of text message he'd sent to his roommates asking whether they were responsible for these damaged tires.
That's interesting. But I recall that he never showed a picture of his tires being deflated or anything like that. So he's just saying like, oh, I checked with my roommates because mine are slashed.
When Haley's childhood friend Sydney saw the Snapchat video, she was alarmed by Haley being targeted this way. She saved it because she was genuinely worried something worse may happen. When Haley went to get new tires, the damage cost was around $600. But that wasn't the only concern. Both Haley and Kevin strongly suspected Orlando was the perpetrator. Sydney and Haley's mom shared the same suspicion, and they were all in favor of Haley filing a police report. When Haley told Orlando she planned on reporting it to the police, he tried to discourage her. He said he didn't think it was a good idea, and he pointed the finger at Kevin. But everyone knew that wasn't true. Kevin was with Haley the whole time, and after being encouraged by those close to her, she decided to report it to Binghamton Police. Officer Solly Shoemaker took to report, but ultimately Haley chose not to press charges against anyone specific. So she didn't name Orlando as the person responsible.
Plus, most of the time, the police are going to ask for proof, like a ring camera or video evidence that it was really that person. They don't just take someone's word for it. So they probably wouldn't have been able to do much had she named Orlando as a perpetrator. However, there would have been a record of his behavior, and that's important to document.
Haley knew that if she named Orlando, his nursing career would be in jeopardy. Under state law, he could face up to 4 years in prison and possibly even be kicked out of college if convicted of criminal mischief. Haley didn't want that on her conscience, especially if she turned out to be wrong about who did it. Oddly, Orlando never reported any damage to his tires.
Of course he didn't, because eventually, according to Sydney, Orlando confessed to Haley that he was the one responsible, and then he actually paid for the tires to be replaced. It was the right thing for him to do, given what had happened, and Haley seemed to be happy that they were just moving on from what she believed was just a lapse of judgment on his part in the heat of the moment. However, Haley's friends and family were not only deeply concerned that Orlando had done this, but that there was no way of knowing what he might do next. And that is kind of scary. Karen struggled with this because she didn't push Haley to pursue charges against Orlando back when the incident happened. But now that she's looking back, she wondered if she had, would Haley still be here? This was just one of many painful questions that plagued her conscience, even though the investigators hadn't charged Orlando with Haley's murder yet.
But they did feel like they were on the right track because unbeknownst to Haley's mom, things actually escalated. Haley's friend Michelle was just one of many people in their circle of friends who noticed that after Haley decided that she just wanted to be friends with Orlando, he developed an unhealthy obsession with her. He became possessive and controlling. Orlando got angry when Haley spent time with other people, even her friends, and he would drive by her house back and forth, especially when he could see Kevin's car out front. He would text her incessantly and even come out to her place uninvited, doing weird things like standing on the front porch, smoking, and waiting for Haley to come outside, even if that meant he had to wait for hours.
I can't help but feel like this is also to monitor her, to see what she was doing and when she came and went, which is not okay. And her roommate Josie even had to go out there multiple times and tell Orlando to please leave, but he wouldn't. He wanted to know where Haley was and who she was with at all times. Haley withdrew from the friendship for a while. She was hoping that if she did the whole no contact thing, Orlando would get over her and stop breaching her boundaries. But this was hard because let's not forget, she has to see him in class every day. And I forgot about that, but that's right. She had to face him day in and day out during their nursing classes. But then I wondered if maybe she could have been requested to transfer into other classes. But let me just say that it is very inconvenient in your very last semester of college to be uprooted and placed somewhere else. And I think she most likely thought that this would be over soon when they graduated. And those close to her said that despite Orlando's behavior, Haley still considered him her friend. She wasn't the kind of person to just cut people off and end friendships if someone seemed to be struggling or having a tough time. And I could also imagine that she possibly felt guilty because she was kind of one of the reasons that he felt this way. But above all, she trusted that Orlando would respect her wishes. She just wanted to go back to the way things were when they first met. Even her family and friends were warning her not to reconnect with him and continue their friendship. They could see that Orlando was manipulating her into feeling sorry for him, which he did a lot. But Haley wasn't being 100% honest with her friends and family about all the crazy things that Orlando had been doing. It was classic stalking behavior. And what he would do is that he would actually talk his way out of his behavior, trying to convince her that he wasn't actually stalking her.
He was a smooth talker.
He was.
Very convincing. He had a way of making Haley feel bad for him, and she was really understanding and a very friendly person, so many times she gave in after he apologized. And at least they'd be on speaking terms again.
And I was wondering what you would do, the audience. I want to hear from you because this is a tricky situation. And we all think we know what we would have done in a similar situation, but you really don't know what's going on in someone else's mind and what they're capable of. But getting back to the investigation, Lieutenant Miner and his detectives continued putting together the pieces of what may have happened during Haley's last hours. And they started to analyze security footage, phone and credit card records, and there happened to be a security camera on the outside of Orlando's house that his landlord had installed to keep track of the things that were going on at his property.
So let's start with March 8th in the middle of the night. This would be when Haley was deep into game night and drinking with her roommates and friends.
And a bit of a recap at this present time in the situation, Haley was not in a serious relationship with anyone. Her and Kevin were on pause because she was finishing up her nursing program and about to graduate. Remember, she had plans to start her new job and therefore she was just on an off period from being exclusive with Kevin. It was 6 months following the incident with Orlando slashing her tires, and the two of them had moved past all that and were casually hanging out as friends, but would occasionally hook up. I just wanted everyone to be up to speed.
Back to the footage at Orlando's. It showed him leaving his house at 2:30 a.m. on March 8th. He must have headed over to Haley's because what's interesting is that 45 minutes later, around 3:14 a.m., the cameras show Orlando and Haley walking up to his door.
For anyone watching, we have this footage and you can see Orlando walking ahead of Haley and then a shot of Haley close behind. The thing is, Haley is never seen on that footage again.
But around 9:45 a.m., Orlando was seen on camera walking outside the house, clearing garbage out of the driveway and then driving off in his car alone. He returned about an hour later, going back inside and carrying a plastic bag. Still, he wasn't seen again on camera until 6:38 p.m. that evening, when he was seen exiting the home and walking down the side of the house to go down to the basement. Then at 8:22 p.m., Orlando was seen leaving the house alone carrying a suitcase.
Well, the investigators had a working theory at this point. They matched up those receipts from CVS Pharmacy to those sleeping aids. Remember that? And that was inside the house. And they matched this up to the time Orlando's seen that morning, leaving and coming back an hour later with the plastic bag. Like I told you, it was melatonin and ZQuil to be exact. And based on the results of Haley's autopsy, investigators concluded that Orlando had more than likely attacked her in his bed after she had fallen asleep, and not long after they arrived back at his house. Then, leaving her body there, he went out to purchase those sleeping pills from the pharmacy before returning home and writing that note to his family. It appeared as though he had made 2 attempts at taking his own life. First, possibly attempting to overdose, but it not working, so he went down to the basement to fetch those hooks for the makeshift noose and screwing them into the kitchen doorway so they would hold the tie that Orlando used. But Orlando's idea didn't work, and he either accidentally fell or purposely did with the intent to make it look like he was so distraught that he was trying to end his life. He did appear to have hit his head on something, causing it to bleed, but not seriously injuring himself enough not to be able to think or drive, and leaving Haley behind without calling 911 or letting anyone know that she had died.
Instead, investigators found gauze, so they believed he bandaged his wound before packing the suitcase he was seen leaving with. But where was he headed?
I don't know, but the investigators knew he had dual citizenship, not just from his records, but friends of Haley's had mentioned this, and also his sister and his roommate, Jesse. They suspected that he had most likely fled back to Nicaragua where his mother was. So they started checking flight records, and sure enough, they get a hit at JFK Airport, which is a 3-hour drive away. And initially they found out that he tried to catch a flight to Miami, but he missed the plane. So instead, he indeed got on a flight to Nicaragua. So they pulled up the CCTV footage and they confirmed it was him. You can see him. He's got a bandage around his head and he's walking down the corridor of the airport. They also located his car parked in the airport parking lot. So damn, he escaped to another country. Ugh, we know what's going to happen now.
The next day, Orlando was officially named a suspect, the Binghamton Police Department announcing he'd fled to Nicaragua. It was now the job of the Broome County District Attorney Steve Cornwell to seek an indictment for a grand jury. If Orlando were indicted, a warrant for his arrest would need to be presented to the U.S. State Department to facilitate extradition proceedings. In a statement about bringing Haley's killer to justice, D.A. Cornwell wrote, quote, "Every day we work to protect Broome County residents and those living in our community. When a life is taken, we will use all available legal procedures and resources to bring justice to the victim, her family, the defendant, and our community."
Though Nicaragua does have an extradition treaty with the U.S., they have been notoriously uncooperative in this regard. Chances of extradition are therefore pretty low in most cases, especially with someone who actually has a citizenship there and has not just merely fled there to escape. The treaty does not allow for Nicaragua to extradite their own citizens to the United States, but it does allow Nicaragua to request a return of their citizen from the United States if they've done something over there. Further, the treaty specifies a list of offenses that the individual must be charged with in order for extradition to occur. This was going to be tough for investigators on Haley's case. If Orlando had actually fled the country and was found to be responsible for Haley's death, this was going to present a whole new level of diplomatic and multi-jurisdictional challenges. He was already 2,000 miles away in Nicaragua. He landed at 3:55 p.m. local time, which meant on March 9th. So he had ample time to now be hiding out.
But by March 13th, the Nicaraguan National Police located Orlando. He'd been admitted that same day as an inpatient at the Oscar Denalio Rosales School Hospital in Leon. He was seeking treatment for self-inflicted injuries and still had a bandage on the left side of his forehead. They discovered that he was met at Managua International Airport by his mother, Martha, who drove him 3 hours to the family home in Chinandega.
They still didn't know when Orlando actually contacted his mom, whether he told her what happened or whether he just asked to be picked up from the airport. once he was there.
But 4 days after Orlando arrived, Martha drove him to the hospital to seek treatment for self-inflicted injuries. Orlando was arrested and taken into custody, which was encouraging given that the charges hadn't been filed against him yet in the U.S. The following day, the General Commissioner Francisco Diaz-Madrid, Deputy Director General of the National Police, held a press conference announcing the arrest and publishing photos and footage of Orlando in custody. But he'd already lawyered up, now represented by criminal defense attorney Michael Bachner in New York City.
Investigators knew this was going to be an uphill battle because unlike other countries where we have those extradition agreements, Nicaragua was more problematic than most. Due to the political unrest, it had a reputation for corruption and bribery. This was only going to make things more difficult to bring Orlando to justice.
Finally, on March 16th, Orlando was formally indicted for the murder back in New York, and an arrest warrant was finally signed and issued by Binghamton City Court. The next day, Broome County authorities charged Orlando with second-degree murder. Under state law, if he was returned to the United States and convicted, he could face 15 years to life in prison. This was also the first time DA Steve Cornwell announced to the public that Haley had been found thanks to the efforts of her friends, as well as how she died. The blood found near Haley's body was revealed to be Orlando's, most likely from his head injuries. The DA was remaining tight-lipped on a possible motive, but he was confident Orlando would be extradited.
And of course, getting Orlando back to the U.S. was their first priority. Meanwhile, back in Haley's hometown, over 1,000 mourners showed up for her funeral. It was held on the evening of March 18th, and thanks to the generosity of everyone around them, as well as total strangers who had never even met Haley, her funeral costs were covered as a result of a GoFundMe, and her family was incredibly grateful. The fundraiser was set up by Haley's friend, Michelle, and they raised $25,000 within just days. There were piles of white roses that sat on top of Haley's casket, and her dad, Gordon, gave a raw and emotional eulogy. He talked about his experience of cleaning out Haley's bedroom and how it was truly the essence of his eldest daughter, telling those who had gathered that the room spoke of her happiness, dreams, aspirations, and joy, and how even a quick look gave insight into who she was as a person. The light colors, the dream catchers, the collectibles, the keepsakes, all memories of good times. Haley's mom, Karen, and sister Maddie struggled to hold back tears as Gordon spoke of the light that Haley's presence brought to everyone. Her family asked that donations be made in Haley's memory to the university's Decker School of Nursing, which would later become a memorial fund.
2 months later, Haley's family would have to face another distressing milestone at what would have been her graduation. A chair had been set aside for Haley, with her green gown draped over the back and a picture of the smiling young woman sitting next to her cap. Gordon accepted his daughter's diploma on her behalf. It helped him feel closer to Haley and was public recognition for all of her hard work. However, while Being You and everyone in Haley's life were still reeling from her death, it was only 5 weeks after her murder that another student was attacked, this time on campus. On April 15th, around 10:30 p.m., 19-year-old first-year engineering student João Souza from Brazil was stabbed in his dorm. The following day, another student, 20-year-old Michael Roque, was arrested after campus and city police identified him as the attacker on CCTV, concluding that he had targeted João intentionally. The university president again made a statement to provide reassurance to the student body and their families that the university was taking campus safety very seriously.
Wow, so there's another murder of a student at the same school. They must have been so scared being on campus. It kind of reminds me of like the Idaho killings, how scared everyone was. This is supposed to be a place where you feel safe. Parents send their kids away thinking they're going to have a good time, they're going to get a degree. However, with just 2 murders in less than 6 weeks, the campus was feeling anything but safe. And it wasn't until August 2019 that there was a development in Haley's case. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for all of her loved ones, but finally, the Nicaraguan authorities had decided that 23-year-old Orlando would not be extradited. Yeah, You heard me correctly. He would not be handed over to U.S. authorities.
But there was some good news. The following month, police in Nicaragua charged him with femicide. Under Nicaraguan law, this is the formal gender-specific offense of murdering a woman with whom the perpetrator has had a romantic relationship.
Here, we don't have that exact offense, but normally it is a hate crime where a woman is actually targeted and killed just because she is a woman. So it's a little bit different. In Nicaragua, it's more like romantic relationship, the person gets murdered. But femicide itself is usually you're just killed for your gender. But this was good news because Orlando was still going to be heading to trial. It just wasn't going to be in the US. But their laws and their judicial process is much different. And this reminds me of the case we did in Thailand. But under the laws in Nicaragua, Orlando wasn't even required to enter a plea. And even though the news that he would be tried for Haley's murder was a positive thing, Broome County DA Cornwell back in New York and Haley's family were very disappointed when they learned this news. It made them nervous because they're unfamiliar with this other legal system. And the DA wasn't convinced or confident that this Nicaraguan court was going to bring justice. And I would feel the exact same way.
However, things took an encouraging turn when Nicaraguan prosecutors reached out asking Broome County to assist in preparing the case. They were on a tight deadline, too. The trial was due to start in just 8 days. Without hesitation, the Broome County authorities sent their full file to Nicaraguan prosecutors and hastily made arrangements to fly witnesses to Binghamton to facilitate their testimony from the DA's office via video link.
So wow, they were basically doing their testimonies from Zoom, but it's better than nothing. Yeah. And 23-year-old Orlando's trial got underway on October 1st, 2019. It was held at the Managua Judicial Complex before Judge Maria Fabiola Bentoncourt. Just like here in the U.S., defendants in Nicaragua are innocent until proven guilty, and the burden of proof lies with the prosecution. While Orlando would normally have been entitled to a jury trial, due to the circumstances, his guilt or innocence would be determined by this judge. Meanwhile, back in New York, at the DA's office, they set up this Zoom call where witnesses would come in and they would testify through an interpreter. This secure live stream allowed those in Broome County, including reporters, to watch the entire trial right in the DA's office.
Prosecutors argued that Orlando strangled Haley in bed, motivated by jealousy. He was unwilling to accept that Haley didn't want to be with him and that she would return and rekindle things with Kevin. After killing Haley and realizing what he'd done, he wrote a note about taking his life and, in effect, confessing to the crime before changing his mind and fleeing the country.
I think some of that is letting him off too easily, because I do believe the reason he killed her is because he couldn't have her to himself and he saw her slipping away. Kind of reminds me of one of the first cases I ever did on my main channel of Lauren Giddings. She was a law student and she was also killed by a guy who wanted more and she was about to graduate. It's like the time is ticking away. And I think Orlando figured this would possibly be one of the last times that he was able to convince Haley to get close to him on a night where she was clearly intoxicated at 3 o'clock in the morning. But like Cinderella, the spell would soon wear off and Haley would be sober again and then moving on without him. So I think he cowardly took her life while she was lying there asleep in his bed. His bed would be the last bed that she would ever be in. And I think he enjoyed knowing that. I don't think he was ever planning on taking his own life. He's in the medical field. His dad and his sisters are physicians. I think he knew what it would take to truly end his life, and he purposely chose methods that would not work to make it look like he was so regretful. But I think he knew that he was going to flee and he was hoping that he would get away with murder. So tell me your thoughts, because I just want to know. These are just my thoughts.
Haley's mom, Karen, testified on the first day of trial. She told the court she wasn't sure exactly when the romantic relationship started, but that it had been on and off for maybe a year. Haley's roommate, Josie, testified saying Orlando has always been obsessive over Haley. He has always been upset with her doing something. The court also heard from Kevin and Orlando's friend and roommate, Jesse, who said he only saw positive interactions between Haley and Orlando. Still, he wasn't privy to what went on when he wasn't around. The second day of the trial was for law enforcement witnesses, including Investigator Peters, Officer Sager, and the pathologist who performed Haley's autopsy. Altogether, 17 witnesses testified for the prosecution.
Despite the concerns that Haley's parents harbored over how transparent this court process would be, they actually felt more confident as the days passed. And as they observed things that unfolded, Karen was angry at Orlando's demeanor in court. This man did not appear to be remorseful at all, and instead, it seemed like he was treating this as a minor inconvenience. Like, let's get this over with. I really think he thought he was going to get away with this. And it's exactly what I would expect from a person like him. However, the tenacity of the prosecutor and the professionalism of the judge impressed both the DA and the Andersons, giving them reassurance that Haley's case was being taken seriously. There was no denying the details of the forensic evidence. They were distressing for Haley's family to hear, and this trial was the very first time that they'd heard any of the information about exactly how Haley had been murdered. And all the while, back in the US, social media was buzzing with support on Haley's behalf. There were so many posts being made, mostly about femicide and bringing awareness to the seriousness of Haley's case. There was even a petition created on change.org by Haley's mom to make femicide an offense in the United States, and it had over 1,300 signatures.
As for Orlando's attorney, Eduardo Ruby, he was relying on an insanity defense, but he never submitted his client's psychiatric evaluation to the court before trial. Dr. Ronald Lopez Aguilar, who was the defense's only witness, testified that Orlando was intoxicated when he killed Haley, which led him not fully appreciating the wrongness of his actions. The court heard that Orlando apparently couldn't remember what had happened after arriving home with Haley, like he had blacked out in some drunken stupor and that he had only learned she was dead when he woke up next to her the following morning. It was a defense that was grasping at straws. There was no evidence from anyone that Orlando had been under the influence or impaired.
Right, because he had been the one who drove to go get the intoxicated Haley from her house and then bring her back to his place.
But Dr. Lopez Aguilar told the court that while Orlando was in custody awaiting trial, he had experienced several epileptic episodes.
But what does that have to do with deciding to strangle someone?
Right, it doesn't.
Something that takes not only force, but time and intention. But finally, a verdict was reached. And on November 1st, just before Judge Bendacourt announced her verdict, she gave Haley's parents the opportunity to provide their victim impact statements. And Karen told the court that Haley was a beautiful, intelligent, and friendly girl, that she had her whole life to look forward to. She was and still is her best friend, and she missed her every day. Her father mentioned that his daughter lived by compassionate spiritual means, that she showed love to everyone that she met, and she would light up the path of the unfortunate, and that her flame was now extinguished. And of course, Orlando chose not to address the court, probably because they were going to see right through his act.
Judge Betancourt only deliberated for 90 minutes before announcing that Orlando was found guilty, and was scathing in her remarks, not just about his conduct, but violence against women in general.
Good. I'm glad that she went so hard on him.
Me too. The judge was unequivocal in condemning what had occurred, saying that when Haley didn't want a romantic relationship, Orlando disposed of her, wanting to punish her rather than accept the decision.
Yeah, he didn't get what he wanted, so he threw her away like trash so that nobody else could have her. It's evil and it's disgusting. And when Gordon and Karen Anderson were again given the opportunity to speak immediately following the verdict, they addressed Orlando directly. And Karen said, quote, "I hope that the demons that are inside you that enabled you to commit such a heinous crime are able to get fixed. Because of you, my daughter will never be able to fill her life to the potential that she had. She will never get to see the age of 49 or 50 or beyond," end quote.
Gordon agreed, adding, "I want to leave you with this. I saw an endearing photo of you and your mother hugging each other. My heart breaks for her, it truly does, because you stole from your own mother. And even though she has unconditional love for you, every time she hugs you, she will get a glimpse of that monster within you, and she'll know that one day you might get out."
Following the conclusion of the proceedings, Karen thanked the DA in front of U.S. reporters, saying that he worked relentlessly and that when all of this started, she kept her faith in the system, and it was her faith that proved to be the right thing to do. She knows that it's not going to bring Haley back, but at least she could get closure.
Standing between Gordon and Karen, Broome County DA Steve Cornwell added his comments. He said, quote, "We saw two governments working together. We saw justice take place in a courtroom on an international stage. We saw a very professionally run courtroom and a very zealous prosecutor who really presented the evidence well. We're certainly satisfied with the verdict. Today, the justice was served as much as it ever could be in cases like this. These are two of the strongest parents that you will ever meet."
After this verdict, Orlando was looking at a sentence of 25 to 30 years in prison. And 2 weeks later, he received the maximum penalty of 30 years.
Gordon Anderson spoke out about learning about the signs that certain people can have when showing these stalking traits.
And Karen told reporters of her hope that Haley's case had highlighted the need for an increased education for young people around the dangers of unhealthy and unsafe relationships. And you could have guessed this, but Orlando, of course, appealed his sentence on the basis of that it was excessive, and he requested a new psychiatric evaluation. But his request was rejected, and the trial court's decision was upheld.
These cases don't always end positively. And though Haley can never be brought back, today 28-year-old Orlando is held at the Directorate of Judicial Assistance, also known as El Chipote, in Managua. Upon release, he will be 52 years old.
That is, if he survives life inside this infamous Nicaraguan prison system, which is known for violence and chronic overcrowding. He may not be alive for long, but if he does live to see his release date, the Broome County DA could choose to pursue extradition at that point. And I think 52 years old is still an age where you have a lot of life to live. And I don't think someone who takes someone else's life like this should get a chance to live freely. So I do hope that if he lives to see release, Orlando is returned to the United States and faces trial on his outstanding second-degree murder charge. Because guess what? There is no double jeopardy when you're dealing with two different countries. So he can still be held responsible here. In her honor, her friend Jessie wrote a song for her called Haley's Comet. And Karen isn't the only one who has become a passionate advocate for raising awareness about recognizing the signs of a toxic relationship. Haley's neighbor and childhood friend, Melanie, began volunteering at an agency in hopes that she can save other women from the same fate as Haley. Karen keeps Haley's ashes in her old bedroom. She's essentially back home where she was planning on returning after college, which is just so heartbreaking. Haley had so much ready to give the world in her new career, and now there will be people who never get to experience her kindness, compassion, and authenticity. There's no denying Haley was an inspiration to so many people around her, and while she's no longer physically here, her positive attitude towards life and her generosity of spirit is something we can all take away as part of her legacy to help brighten the lives of the people around us.
Thank you so much for watching today's video and listening to Haley's story. We hope to see you in the next one.
Bye.